Raise your hand if you're married. None of you are married. Raise your hand if you would like to be married to your baby's father. One. The rest of you who don't plan to get married, why don't you plan to get married? I'd like to know that.
You already have your child to think about, and then a whole family to care for. You know, it's a lot of responsibility, and then you don't want the commitments.
I wouldn't want no man holding me down because I think I can make it as a single parent.
But don't you think you might need help in raising that baby from a man?
Not really. I didn't have a father. My father wasn't in the home, so it really, male figures are not substantially important in the family.
Though you would not have heard such things said so freely because they were not embraced so widely. The strong family was still the backbone of Black America, and 3 out of 4 children had both parents at home. That is true no longer. Most Black children are now growing up without their fathers. The result is a world turned upside down as children copy what they see and repeat what they learn. LaDawn said she didn't have a father in her home and doesn't think her children need one. She's not unusual. Half the Black families today are headed only by a woman. Clorinda said she could make it on her own as a single parent. She has never been married and is raising her daughter without a man's help. She's not unusual. Today, nearly 60% of all Black children are born out of wedlock.
So that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil toward his brother, and toward the wife of his bosom, and toward the remnant of his children which he shall leave.
The white woman's liberation movement, we don't have anything to do with that. We have not been under the control of the black man for over 500 years, so what do we have to get liberated from them from? That's the white woman and her man. They're going through that, and that's their business. They only introduced it to break down the civil rights movement. Civil rights movement started with the black man, the black woman, and the black child standing together, trying to plead for freedom, justice, and equality, and more benefits in the country that they had built. They threw the white woman in there with the women's liberation movement and made it a woman against man thing. That created a big separation between black men and black women because then everybody started going for self. Then they bring the welfare system in and tell us in order to feed and clothe and house our children, we have to give up our man. You have to put the man out of the house. Because they want to keep endorsing into the black community that the black man is no good and that he is not deserving of respect. He is not deserving of us letting him give us any protection or instruction, and that we are better than them.
Did you know the U.S. government once penalized black families for having fathers in the home? And the effects are still felt today. During the 1960s and 70s, public assistance programs such as welfare and housing aid included what was called the man in the house rule. Under this rule, a woman could not receive government assistance if a man, even the father of her children, was living in a home. This forced thousands of black families into a heartbreaking choice: stay together and struggle financially, or separate so the mother and the children could receive benefits. For many black fathers, this meant 1, being forced out of their own homes, 2, struggling with unemployment due to discrimination, and 3, watching their families suffer economically despite their best efforts. Even though the rule was eventually struck down, the damage was already done. It contributed to generational poverty. Instead of building black wealth, black families had to survive on unstable government aids. It contributed to fatherless households. This policy incentivized single-parent homes, leading to a rise in a father absence. And then 3, mass incarceration. As economic opportunities shrank for black men, many were funneled into the prison system. How does it still affect us today? Well, black families still face economic disadvantages due to lost generational wealth. The stereotype of the absent black father was largely created by policies like this, not by choice. In reality, black fathers are among the most involved parents when present. Government policies still shape black wealth and family structures, making it critical to understand history and advocate for our economic empowerment.
The man in the house rule was written to prevent welfare cheating, to make sure that aid to families with dependent children would go only to families headed by mothers. But the effect of the man in the house rule is to create for children an atmosphere of investigation and surveillance. And thus, the welfare system in its operation turns out to be a system to make life harder for children.
The welfare system helps the disintegration of the American family. It offers money to families if the fathers will leave them and stay away, in that sense undoing the very stability of the family and taking away one of the two parents that children, of course, need. And what I have seen, I'm afraid to say, all over the country is that the legal system works against the best kind of home for these children. We don't encourage parents to be at home with the children. We don't encourage mothers to feel that they can find their destiny as mothers. We take away, in many of the most vulnerable homes, fathers from those homes. We herd foster children together in institutions rather than trying to find decent homes for them. We don't tap the resources we have in communities and with respect to older people so that they can help out vulnerable homes. We don't sanction and encourage and support in every way, morally, psychologically, and financially, the dignity and integrity of the home. And in the worst of it is that the homes that are most vulnerable are the homes that are least supported by the policies of local, state, and federal governments. And no wonder then, out of these more vulnerable neighborhoods, we get an endless cycle of troubled, delinquent, wayward youth who grow up even more and become the lawbreakers of our society. Now, I don't know how you break this cycle except by starting out with young children.
It's very interesting that the welfare system reaps more destruction on the black family and the black community than anything that happened 100 years after slavery.
There have been a lot of varying opinions on the causes of wealth gaps, inequality. One of the biggest points that a lot of people point to is welfare. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen, the effects of it? Negative, positive?
Yeah, I think that the decline that we saw was not a legacy of slavery, because up until 1965, 85% of all black families had a man and a woman raising children. But right after the Watts riots, Cloward and Piven, two social scientists at Columbia University School of Social Work, who was socialist, and felt that we, in order to address poverty, we need to redistribute income. And so they wrote a paper that talked about separating work from income. And they said, well, we've got to remove the stigma. So they redefined welfare as social insurance and then later as reparations. But also they couldn't have just done it by issuing a policy paper. The federal government with the poverty programs embraced that paradigm and actually set up offices in New York and Philly and major cities to recruit people in welfare. They were joined by the Black Panthers because they said that the nuclear family was Eurocentric and therefore racist. The women's movement joined in because it was patriarchal and therefore it was anti-male. Welfare replaced the father, and so then you saw exactly what Cloward and Piven predicted, this tremendous decline in marriage in the community. And as a result, then you saw the acting out coming, and next thing you know, we went from having only 15% of marriage down to 70% in less than 4 decades. In fact, Fred Siegel, in his book, The Future Once Happened Here, and he says in the early 70s, a period of just 4 years, 4 million blacks flooded into the welfare system at a time when the unemployment rate in New York was under 4% for blacks. So welfare expansion was not in response to unemployment. It was response to a leftist progressive policy.
Planned on a minimum budget, there are few places for children to play. Because of the same kind of planning, Perry Homes has no doctor, no dentist, no pharmacy. Nearby, there is a well baby clinic, but no sick baby clinic. And the sick must travel 12 miles to wait for attention at Grady Memorial Hospital. And partly because of the general rule that welfare is cut off if there is a man in the house, fathers are often driven away so that mother and children can eat.
85% of the head of household is a woman, because most of the men who should be in the household, they cannot make a decent living. And of course it is better to know that a child will be fed 12 months out of the year than 3 months, which you do in the summer when construction work, you can make a decent living.
Have a choice. We chose greed. We chose a bag over a man. We chose to not have our children. We would rather have a bunch of money than have our children have a father in the home.
I disagree.
No. You have to know the history. This is proven fact.
History.
No,
men were not able to work and provide for their families. We were forced to take the government check.
That's false.
They couldn't stay in the house if they were there.
That's false.
Then how were they going to feed the children?
False.
And where was
the children were fed? Women were greedy
because it was coming from the government.
No. Let's
but
get
if the
this
husband
clear.
was home, he wouldn't be employed.
Black women wanted to be like white women in the Cosmopolitan magazine. The woman who started Cosmopolitan magazine, the main editor, she is now a Catholic, and she repented from what she did. She said we were teaching women because we wanted all women to feel that we had a gripe with white men. And so, this is public knowledge. You look it up on YouTube.
She talks about it.
Yes, absolutely. They wanted black women to also be part of their movement and other races because it wasn't enough. The black woman and the black man had to stay together in the U.S. because it was the only way for us to overcome. What they did was with Cosmo, they lied. These were women that would say, you know what, this is a single woman, moved to New York. She's sleeping with different men. She has her life. She has her own money, her education. She's getting these jobs. These women were promoting promiscuity and living a certain lifestyle when they were all married. They were all lying and making up these people because it was supposed to be a fantasy magazine.
I tell people all the time, like when they're like, oh, you're so strong. And I'm like, but I have to be. I don't want to be like, I want to be fragile. And people see it as a weak word, but think about it. When something's fragile, you treat it more with care. You're very careful. Treat me like I'm fragile because I can break too. And people are so used to me being so strong and so independent that they usually don't check on me. If I do have an issue and I happen to voice it, like, oh, you're fine. Like, they brush me off. Or it's kind of like, Shakira, you always figure it out. But I'm human too. I have feelings too. I feel things very deeply too. So don't treat me like I'm strong, because I don't consider that to be a thing of like, oh, that's so great an accomplishment. No, treat me like I'm fragile. Treat me with care.
So that was the first trick bag, to make black women think that they were actually going to step up in society, to have more means, to have anything. They were still impoverished. They had not moved up not 1 inch on the tax bracket or anything. Nothing changed. It was still impoverished. They were still poor. But now they'll be poor with no guidance. Now they'll be poor with no covering. Now they'll be poor and out of order. Now they'll be poor and chaotic. Now they'll be poor and vulnerable. Now they'll be poor and open to any and every attack that we got lined up for them. See, it was never about not getting you out of poverty. You in perpetual poverty. They not trying to get you out of that.